The life and ministry of Jesus Christ are marked by extraordinary miracles that continue to inspire and deepen the faith of millions around the world. His miracles revealed his identity as the Son of God, fulfilled Old Testament prophecies, and offered glimpses of the kingdom of heaven. First, turning water into wine. This miracle took place at a wedding in Cana of Galilee, where Jesus, his disciples, and his mother, Mary, were guests. During the celebration, the hosts ran out of wine, a potential embarrassment in Jewish culture, where hospitality was highly valued. Mary approached Jesus, asking him to intervene. Although he initially seemed reluctant, Jesus instructed the servants to fill 6 large stone jars with water. When the water was drawn out and presented to the master of the banquet, it had turned into high-quality wine. Second, feeding the 5,000. This miracle unfolded after Jesus had spent the day teaching and healing a large crowd in a remote area. As evening approached, his disciples urged him to send the people away to find food. Instead, Jesus instructed the disciples to feed the crowd, though they only had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. After blessing the food, Jesus divided it and distributed it to the people through his disciples. Miraculously, not only was everyone fed, but 12 baskets of leftovers were collected. Third, healing the blind man. While walking with his disciples, Jesus encountered a man who had been blind since birth. The disciples asked if the man's blindness was caused by his sin or his parents. Jesus responded that neither was the case, rather, the man's condition existed so that God's works might be displayed in him. Jesus spat on the ground, made mud with his saliva, and applied it to the man's eyes. He then instructed the man to wash in the pool of Siloam. After obeying, the man's sight was miraculously restored. Fourth, walking on water. After feeding the 5,000, Jesus sent his disciples ahead in a boat while he went up a mountainside to pray. Late at night, as the disciples were struggling against strong winds and waves on the Sea of Galilee, they saw Jesus walking toward them on the water. Terrified, they thought he was a ghost, but Jesus reassured them, saying, "Take courage. It is I, don't be afraid." Peter, one of the disciples, wanting to join him, stepped out of the boat and began walking on the water toward Jesus. However, when Peter became frightened by the wind, he began to sink and cried out for help. Jesus immediately reached out, saving him, and calmed the storm when they entered the boat. Fifth, raising Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus, a close friend of Jesus and the brother of Mary and Martha, fell gravely ill in Bethany. Despite being informed, Jesus delayed his visit, and Lazarus died. When Jesus arrived 4 days later, he found the family mourning. Moved by their grief, Jesus wept but reassured them that Lazarus' death would glorify God. He went to Lazarus' tomb and, after praying, commanded, "Lazarus, come out." To everyone's astonishment, Lazarus emerged from the tomb, alive and fully restored. Sixth, healing the woman with an issue of blood. On his way to heal Jairus' daughter, a prominent synagogue leader in the Jewish community, Jesus was surrounded by a large crowd. Among them was a woman who had suffered from a bleeding disorder for 12 years, despite spending all her resources on unsuccessful treatments. Desperate for healing, she approached Jesus from behind and touched the hem of his garment, believing that even this small act would heal her. Immediately, her bleeding stopped. Jesus, knowing power had gone out from him, turned and asked who had touched him. The woman came forward, trembling, and admitted what she had done. Jesus reassured her, saying, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Seventh, casting out a legion of demons. This miracle occurred after Jesus and his disciples crossed the Sea of Galilee and arrived in the region of the Gerasenes, also called Gadarenes. As soon as Jesus stepped ashore, he was confronted by a man possessed by multiple demons. The man ran to Jesus and fell at his feet. The demons within him, recognizing Jesus as the Son of God, begged not to be sent into the abyss. Instead, they asked to be cast into a herd of pigs grazing nearby. Jesus granted their request, and the demons entered the pigs, causing the entire herd, about 2,000 animals, to rush down a steep bank into the lake and drown. The man was immediately freed from his torment. When the townspeople arrived, they found him clothed and in his right mind, sitting peacefully at Jesus' feet. However, the loss of the pigs frightened the people, and they asked Jesus to leave their region. Before departing, Jesus instructed the healed man to go home and tell his family what God had done for him. The man obediently proclaimed his story, spreading the news throughout the Decapolis. Eighth, the miraculous catch of fish. The The first catch. Jesus was teaching by the Sea of Galilee, also called the Lake of Gennesaret, with a crowd pressing around him. He saw 2 fishing boats at the water's edge and got into Simon Peter's boat, asking him to put out a little from shore. From there, Jesus taught the people. Afterward, Jesus instructed Peter to take the boat into deeper water and let down the nets for a catch. Peter, an experienced fisherman, expressed doubt, saying they had worked all night and caught nothing. However, he obeyed Jesus' command. To Peter's amazement, the nets filled with such a large number of fish that they began to break. Peter and his partners, James and John, called for help, and both boats were filled to the point of nearly sinking. Recognizing the divine nature of this event, Peter fell at Jesus' feet and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." Jesus reassured him, saying, "Don't be afraid, from now on you will fish for people." The disciples left everything and followed him. The second catch. After Jesus' resurrection, some of the disciples, including Peter, Thomas, and John, were fishing on the Sea of Galilee. Despite fishing all night, they caught nothing. At dawn, Jesus, standing on the shore, though they did not yet recognize him, called out to them and instructed them to cast their net on the right side of the boat. When they obeyed, the net was filled with 153 large fish, yet it did not tear. John recognized the man as Jesus, and Peter, in his eagerness, jumped into the water to reach him. The disciples hauled the catch to shore, where Jesus had prepared a breakfast of fish and bread. This encounter reaffirmed their calling and strengthened their faith. 9th, healing the deaf and mute man. During Jesus' ministry in the region of Decapolis, a largely Gentile area, a group of people brought to Jesus a man who was deaf and had a severe speech impediment. They begged Jesus to place his hand on the man and heal him. Instead of healing the man in front of the crowd, Jesus took him aside privately, a gesture of personal care and sensitivity. He placed his fingers into the man's ears, then spit and touched the man's tongue. Looking up to heaven, Jesus sighed deeply and said, "Ephphatha," an Aramaic word meaning, "be opened." Immediately, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak clearly. The astonished crowd spread the news, despite Jesus instructing them to remain quiet, proclaiming, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." 10th, healing the 10 lepers. Jesus was traveling along the border between Samaria and Galilee on his way to Jerusalem. During this time, leprosy was a dreaded disease that caused physical suffering and social isolation. People with leprosy were considered unclean and had to live apart from society, often forming colonies with others who suffered the same fate. On this journey, Jesus encountered a group of 10 men afflicted with leprosy. Their condition made them desperate for healing and hope, which they believed Jesus could provide. Standing at a distance, the 10 lepers cried out to Jesus, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." In response, Jesus instructed them to go and show themselves to the priests, as was customary for someone who believed they were healed and wanted to be reinstated into the community. As they obeyed and went, all 10 were miraculously cleansed of their leprosy. However, only one of them, a Samaritan, returned to Jesus. Falling at his feet, he praised God and expressed gratitude for his healing. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? He then told the man, "Rise and go, your faith has made you well." The miracles of Jesus Christ are more than just extraordinary events, they are timeless reminders of his divine power, deep compassion, and unwavering commitment to transforming lives. Let these stories inspire you to look for God's miracles in your own life. Share your thoughts or testimonies in the comments below. How has faith shaped your journey? Let's start a conversation about the power of belief and the miracles that still happen today.